Hi, Caleb and Steve from Brownells here, and in today's video we're continuing our reloading series. In this video we're going to talk about how to size cases, setting up your sizing die, and different stuff like that. And Steve, I think we're just going to stick with full length sizing in this one.
Okay.
We're not going to get crazy, alright? So we have different, there's different types of sizing dies. You got like neck sizing. You got your dies with the bushings and stuff in them. We're not going to get into any of that in this video, but we will in the future. But with that being said, Steve, let's kind of dig into what we got here.
All right. Well, there's two basic types of sizing. There's straight wall case sizing and there's bottleneck case sizing. A lot of you rifle guys know what the bottleneck's all about. A lot of you gamers shooting 9mm, you know what the straight case is about, even though it's slightly tapered.
Yep.
So, I don't know how you want to start.
Well, we can just kind of dive right into it because we have dies here.
Let me move my coffee for you.
Yeah, sure. I don't want to knock it over and
spill
coffee in your lap and be all awkward trying to clean it up for you.
What do we got here anyway?
So that one is our 9mm. That's our carbide dies.
Okay.
So that's a full carbide set. And whenever you're doing straight wall, I always find it way easier to just stick with carbide dies.
Wow.
And straight wall is not necessarily limited to pistol either. There's plenty of rifle straight wall stuff out there. There's even some pistol bottleneck stuff out there, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this one we're dealing with carbide. Mainly, I like these because you don't have to lubricate the cases.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about straight wall pistol. You don't have to do any lubing whatsoever.
So we can just kind of jump right into setting up the actual. We're going to need to put our shell holder in and the die itself. So we'll just jump right into doing that. We already have clean brass because in the previous video we did case prep. So we showed you how to use different types of cleaning methods, and these are the results from that. So we'll use those, and the press we're going to be using is this Redding O-frame here.
Right.
Which is great. You can also use whatever press you want. You don't have to use this press. We even have a turret press here. This is the Lyman All-American 8. And the turret is very similar to that, except you can put multiple dies in it and just rotate the head. And we'll do some more with that in the future, so don't hang up too much on that. Setting up the dies is exactly the same. So Steve, let's kind of jump into it. While you get the shell holder put in, I'm just going to briefly talk about why we're even worrying about sizing these things.
Yeah.
And to kind of show here, this is a pistol gauge. This one's made by L.E. Wilson. And it's used to actually check your brass after you size it. And if you notice, it does not go all the way in right now because it expanded whenever it was fired. This was once fired brass. So we need to size it to get it back down in size so that it actually fits in the chamber of our firearm correctly. Steve, you got that shell, You got the shell holder in there.
So let's go and put the sizing die in place. Sizing die is the one with the decapping rod on it to knock out the primer. So in fact, while we've got it out here, let's turn this and bring this out a little bit so it actually will punch the primer clear of the case. And with that being done, I'm going to screw this in.
Yep. And in the last video where we did our case prep, we used cases that we didn't knock the primer out of already.
Yeah.
Which is perfectly fine. You can clean it before that. If you want to knock the primer out first, that's fine. We just recommend using an actual decapping specific die so that you don't dirty up your...
Right. If you just bring it back from the range and before you clean it, just run it through a universal decapping die and dump it in your tumbler and away you go.
Yeah, and the big difference with these is that it doesn't contact the walls of the case. It just punches out the primer.
Right.
So if you look, you can see that diameter difference there. Big difference.
Yeah, you can use that universal for just about any caliber.
Yeah, and so Lee makes one. The Sinclair, there's a Sinclair L.E. Wilson one as well. I like the Lee one, especially because I shoot like a lot of military cartridges. and those primers are crimped, and this one's super heavy duty for knocking those out.
It's a little bit heavier.
Yeah. So, yeah, let's kind of continue from there.
Okay, well, I'm going to set up this sizing die, and the way to do that is you run the ram all the way up with the shell holder in it. Then you screw the die down until it meets the shell holder. Once you do that, depending on the instructions that came with your die, some will have you turn it in a little bit more, some will not. But what I do is I bring the collar down, the locking collar, and then this particular one has a set screw type affair, so we can just turn that in without making any adjustments. There it goes, I think. Yeah. Okay, now we're locked in. So we are ready to size brass.
Yeah, and the cool thing about that is once it's locked in for that press, you just screw it back down into that press, and it's good to go.
So once you rotate dies out, you can just put it back to your original setting, and away you go.
Yep, you don't have to like reconfigure it unless you change reloading presses, which is cool. And also, I have a set of Cutaway dies here just to kind of show you what's going on the inside as we're doing that. So you have your stem here with the actual ball, which goes in the inside of the neck.
Elliptical expander.
Elliptical expander. There's some fancy words for the day.
Right. This is for a rifle, by the way.
Yeah, this is a rifle one, but the overall idea behind it is the same, except the ball's different. So you have your stem here. It has your decapping pin on it, and if you already knocked your primer out, you can run it without the pin. It'll work just fine. So that's not an issue there. But this, you can kind of see the inside here. I'll kind of rotate it a little bit. I don't know how much the camera will be able to see, but for all intents and purposes, it's almost mimics the inside of your firearm chamber.
It's just a little tighter.
It's a little tighter. It's a little bit under that size, so that everything will fit in the chamber, of course. But yeah, that's the basic premise of how it works, regardless if it's stainless or whatever material, whatever type of steel or carbide. It'll work just fine.
And if it's a rifle cartridge, a Bottleneck cartridge, it'll bump the shoulder back as well.
Yep. And the shoulder being this portion right here between the neck and the actual rest of the body. That's your shoulder.
Right, and that's important, especially if you're shooting a semi-auto.
Yeah, yep, for sure. So that shoulder will actually blow out a bit and expand when you fire your firearm.
Right.
And for most semi-autos, you want everything to be a little even more undersized so you get that reliability as it cycles.
Yeah, even with bolt actions and hunting ammo, you full length size that normally to make sure it's going to feed through your magazine and up into the chamber without hanging up and costing you an animal.
Especially for dangerous game.
Yeah.
That's a little more little more on the line in that aspect. So.
Right.
So yeah, Steve, let's keep moving through here, and I'll quit rambling.
All right. Well, we've got our die set up. We've got the proper shell holder in place, so we're going to resize some 9mm brass. Pretty basic. It's a short case. Doesn't take much power to resize it. Put it in the shell holder. Run it up, and I don't know if you heard that, but a pop as the primer comes out. And now I've got a case with no primer. It's been sized all the way down. Let's see if you can see that. And that is sized to go into a chamber again now.
Yep.
And I'll bet you it goes in that gauge.
Yeah, remember before, I could have forced it in there, but I was met with some resistance, but now it'll just fall right in.
Just where it should be.
Yep, perfect.
So you take these and you just repeat. Rinse, lather, repeat, and away you go.
Yep, so let's knock out all 5 of those.
It doesn't take long. And if you want, you can do what they call the double shuffle, which you have a case in your hand, and you take one out, you put one in, and that cuts down on your time as well.
Efficiency.
You get a little bit of muscle memory action going, and you can get pretty fast just on a single stage press. And believe me, I've done a lot of rounds on these.
Awesome. So yeah, now at this point, what we would do is, once we have all these cases, decapped and ready to go, the next step is actually to put primers in them.
Right.
So we're not going to do that in this video, but we are going to show you how to do that. So actually, let's go ahead and let's do some bottleneck stuff.
All right. I've got some 223 cases here that I had my assistant prep before we went on. They've got Hornady lube on them, so they're ready to go.
Yep, so there's a few different case lubes here. We have some Hornady one-shot. Lyman makes a really good case lube as well. And yeah, I mean, the spray-on stuff is the way to go. You just lay your cases out, spray them, and you're good. There's also some other types, like some I've used in the past. Like they have the mat. I don't have one here. I should have one.
You just roll them on the mat?
Yeah, you just roll them on a mat with lube on it, and then that works just fine.
Make sure you clean your brass before you do that, because
Yes.
that mat will pick up everything in the world.
Yes, it will. Mine is. It's probably a good thing I didn't bring mine, because it's actually a little dirty anyway, and I'm embarrassed to show it. But
Yeah, mine picks up cat hair somehow. I don't know how that happens.
yeah, mine has dog hair on it. It's a thing. But
All right.
with that
So
being
do
said,
we have a 223 die here somewhere?
we have several. We have
Oh,
two
man.
sets of 223 dies. So the match grades here, use these.
All right.
The match
We
grades.
might as well.
Yeah, we'll save the match grades for the intermediate/advanced part of the videos here. We're just gonna keep it basic for now.
All right. And again, we look for the one with the decapper rod in it.
Yep.
So for my next trick, I'll need an ordinary shell holder.
All right. There's one right there.
right
That'll
there.
fit it.
Let's make sure it's in there. We'll run it up.
Same process, huh?
Same process.
Easy enough. All right. And also, it's important to talk about over-lubricating, because we mentioned lubricating. You can definitely over-lubricate your cases, and that will cause plenty of issues.
Uh-huh.
It'll dent the shoulder. It'll do some weird stuff, and it will not chamber in your firearm properly if you do any of that.
Before we start, we have to tighten up the set screw. It's a tightening screw on these Hornady dies. If you'll notice, there's a split in the ring here. And when you do that, you want to screw it all the way down and then grab the ring and the die and back them up together. Keep them in the same relative position and then tighten it down. Because if you do it with the collar against the press, it tightens up and grabs, and you can't get your die back out by hand. You have to loosen it up anyway. So just a little fun fact there.
All right, good little pro tip, if you will.
Right. I've done it the hard way and I've done it the easy way. I like doing it
Okay.
the easy way.
Yeah, let's show them the easy way. And just to start on this here, again, this is a case that has not been sized, and it doesn't go in. I can force it in, but especially in the neck area here is where it's going to be super tight, and that's
If it was shot in an AR, it won't go in that gauge.
yeah, for sure. Those were shot in AR, and
Yeah.
I would have to tap them in with like a hammer or something, which I'm not going to do.
All right, so we put it in the shell holder
All right.
and run it up there. Now this requires a little more force than the 9mm.
Yeah, you got more.
And
Contours
notice
there,
when I'm
sizing.
pulling up on the handle, there's some force there because we've sized the neck down. It's smaller than that expander ball we showed you. So you got to run that back through. And some people like to lube the inside of their neck. Some people don't. There's different ways to do that with dry lube. With
Yeah.
the Hornady lube will do it too. So that one is sized. There's no primer in it.
Perfect. Yeah, easy enough. And with this, over time, especially on Bottleneck cartridges, as you size them over and over again, your neck will actually lengthen.
Right.
And then you'll have to trim it, which we'll do in a future video as well. See, yeah, now it just drops right in.
Yeah.
And this gauge here, you see how it's like kind of matte in one area and shiny on the other area? This actually lets you determine if it's in proper spec or not. So this matte colored area here, or matte sheened area, is actually higher than that shiny area.
Right.
So if the base of your case shouldn't be sticking up higher than the matte area, and it shouldn't be sitting lower than the shiny area. So that'll actually tell you if your case is in spec or not, which is great. And on this, if you look at the neck, kind of same thing there. This should actually probably be trimmed, Steve.
Yeah.
So this is a perfect example of one that actually should be trimmed. Same thing on this end. You have the shiny and matte for different heights, right? And the neck is sticking up pretty high, right? And
that can cause you problems if you're doing a traditional crimp, because the length affects the crimp, how much crimp's applied. And in the case of 5.56 or 2.23, if you're using projectiles with cannelures on them, you want it to hit that center of that cannelure when you crimp it. And this could go past it, being longer.
Yep, so this is a perfect candidate for the trimming video we're going to do later.
Exactly.
All right, so we'll hang on to this one. This one we will not go ahead and load until we get that done.
Right.
So I'm going to set that aside. And we'll do the rest and see what happens.
All right, let's see what happens.
This one's good. So if you look at this one, it does not stick up past that higher area there. So this one can continue to the next stage.
I got a confession to make.
Send it.
When I reload 2.23 or 5.56 for AR-15s, they all have a pretty generous chamber in front.
Right.
So as far as constricting the neck or whatever, you don't really have to worry about that. It's going to release the bullet, no problem. It's the crimp you worry about. And I use one of the Lee factory crimps with the collet that just squeezes it.
Mm-hmm.
So the length isn't important. So I rarely trim.
Okay. Well,
2.23.
Hey, fair enough.
357 I trim every time because I want that crimp exactly the same
Yeah.
place in that bullet.
Yep. Yeah, and for a lot of what we use 223 for, it's not a big deal. We're not going to notice the accuracy difference.
Right.
It really comes down to it whenever you start doing some like match type stuff. When you're trying to do precision stuff, that's when you really need to play with your neck tension and get it just right. And the length actually does matter in some of those more match like bolt gun type tighter chambers. But like you said, in like the AR-15s, they're generous.
Right.
So for this setup here, we have two that can move on to be reloaded here, and we just grabbed some random brass. I have no idea.
Fired from different guns, most likely.
Yeah, almost certainly. So these three are going to need to be trimmed. So those are perfect for that video. I'm actually glad we had something to use. I was worried we wouldn't have anything. So perfect. We'll set those aside, and we'll
I got a question.
send it. Yeah, what you got?
When do you not need the full length size?
When do you not need the full length size?
Right.
So there's plenty of like bolt guns out there where people will only neck size.
Right.
Like on those super match bolt guns, like a lot of the like big time precision rifle guys, they will only neck size. They won't touch the rest of the body, and which is perfectly fine in those scenarios, and lets them have more control over that case, because that case is already expanded to fit their chamber perfectly. So they're getting greater accuracy by not full length sizing.
Right. I think a lot of Ruger #1 guys too.
Yep.
Do the same thing.
Oh yeah, those falling block, rolling block type stuff.
Your brass will last forever like
Yep.
that.
Yeah, so you're not overworking the brass. You're not, or I say overworking. You're not putting unnecessary stress on that brass, so it'll last way longer.
Or on yourself, because neck sizing is a whole lot easier than full length sizing, as far as effort on the handle here.
It is, yeah. So like,
if I'm shooting a 22-250 heavy barrel against varmints or something, I don't want to full length size that every time. Once I've formed it to that chamber for that gun, those cases stay with that gun, and I just neck size them the minimum amount it takes to hold that bullet securely.
Yep, and that's perfectly fine on those guns. But I mean, anything semi-auto and stuff you're feeding out of a
Right.
magazine, you're definitely gonna want a full length size.
Same
those.
thing with handguns, revolvers and semi-autos. I full length size everything. You run into a whole lot less trouble that way.
Yeah, and also if you're shopping around for dies, hopefully we've given you enough information here to be able to like read what you're looking at and know what you need. But you'll also see things called small base dies,
Yes.
and those are specifically for your semi-autos. Like, not saying that these aren't going to work in a semi-auto, but those will give you even more reliability out of a semi-auto, because they're basically they're small base, so that the base is actually smaller. They're compressing it down even more, so it fits more reliably into a wider variety of chambers, I should say.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Right. I also had to buy a small base die for my Colt Python.
Oh, interesting.
Because my 357 die wasn't sizing it down far enough.
Okay, interesting.
But they have tight chambers.
Well, good to know. There's
Yeah.
a little more food for thought there.
Yeah.
So interesting. Yeah, I think we pretty much covered everything we need to in this video, Steve.
And more.
And more. Yeah, there's some little bonus stuff there that we didn't plan on talking about. It just came out of the mouth, I guess, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's all there is to it. So join us in the next video. We're actually going to be seating primers, and because these military cases are crimped, you can't just throw a primer in there easily anyways. So we're going to show you how to get rid of that crimp and basically reset the area for that primer.
Show you about 3 or 4 ways to get rid of that crimp.
Yeah, there's at least
We got
3.
a bunch. We got a bunch we can do.
I can think of at least 3, so I'm sure
Yeah.
Steve will have another bonus way there. So
Yeah.
all right, well, that's all there is to it. If you have any questions or comments, and you want to ask us, just leave them down below, depending on where you're watching this video. I know it'll probably be on YouTube, it'll be on Rumble, it'll be on the website for sure. And as always, if you have any questions or you need help with anything for any reason ever, feel free to give us a call on the tech line. We'll be happy to help you out. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.